Welcome to this week's episode of the Projector Podcast. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Editor-in-Chief of ProjectorCentral. Today, freelance writer and editor Brian Nadel joins us from Westchester, New York, to discuss his latest ProjectorCentral review. As a regular contributor, Brian provides in-depth reviews on projectors primarily geared toward schools, businesses, and houses of worship. Today, we will discuss his insights from testing and experiencing the commercial-focused Barco I600-4K15 DLP laser projector. In his written review, Brian noted that the Barco 16 sets the pace for medium to large venue projectors by combining innovative projection technologies from the past 5 years with a unique touchscreen dashboard that puts everything at your fingertips. Brian Nadel, thanks for joining us again today.
Thanks for inviting me, Jeremy.
Well, you were there to help me launch the podcast about a month ago. Episode 1, we're 4 in now. We've rotated through our 3 primary reviewers, and we're back again to talk projectors with you, Brian. Last time we had to kind of keep on a pace because you had a baseball game to watch. Being a Mets fan, it was spring training. We're on a Monday, 11 o'clock. We're not in quite the same pace, but we do have a game tonight that you're interested in, right?
And it's raining in most of the country, so it'll be a rain out day.
Oh, bummer. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's often sometimes we don't even have Monday baseball, so it's typically an off night for a lot of teams traveling. But I look forward to getting on some discussions of baseball, but let's get to the projector talk. I wanted to know, looking ahead on the Barco 1600 before you got started, what were your thoughts, impressions of Barco as a company, as a brand, before we got into actually doing this review? What was your experience with them?
Well, I've been working with them for years in commercial projectors, mostly the big ones, medium and large venue projectors, 15, 20, 30,000 lumens. But my first experience with them was 30, 40 years ago when they were the standard for meeting room projectors with these just massive 3 CRT projectors with curved screens. And their product became synonymous with live video projection. You know, when you were renting a room or trying to set up a appointment with a room, you would ask, does it have a Barco? And that was sort of the standard. And they have kept up with technology. And in fact, this projector shows a lot of new things. It has the technology of the last few years, but with some new items that are very exciting for me, at least.
So you want to take us through the first steps? I know we talked last time about how you immediately get out the tape measure and actually measure the dimensions of the projector when you get it. Is this a particularly large projector? I'm assuming so, with it being a
this class venue of projector are 2-3 people. They require 2 or 3 people to set up, particularly if you're on ladders. It's at least 50 pounds, I think a little bit over. And think of a box 20 by 20 by 8 or 9 inches. So it's pretty hefty.
And we're talking about having some flexibility here as well with lenses and that sort of thing. So are you set a specific lens for your setup, or how did you arrange that? Because there's an assortment of 8 lenses, correct?
Yeah, no, it's a nice lens family. They have this absolutely stunning 0.37-1 ultra short throw, although it's quite expensive. I mean, I use the $3,000 standard throw zoom lens. I think it has a throw of 1 to 1.4-1, which would make it a 1.4x lens. The key thing is that if you have a room from anywhere from a small room, or you want to use ultra short throw so that the speaker can be in front of the image, all the way up to a good size auditorium with maybe a 40-foot throw, this projector can do that. It also allows you to shift the image on screen, up, down, right, left. I think it's about 100% up, down, 30% side to side. And that can give you an enormous amount of flexibility in setting it up where you just can't get the projector in the center of the screen to line up with the center of the screen, which is the case for most installations. It's close, but not perfect.
Right. And you're talking about applications then, just to kind of set the parameters here, what we're looking at. Large conference rooms, school auditoriums, mid-sized churches, museums, planetariums even. I know they wanted to talk about that, even though it would need a special fisheye lens.
Yeah, they have this lens, a fisheye lens that projects onto a curved surface on the ceiling, and they are very active in this area. The key is that you can set up a planetarium without spending $100,000 for one of those huge Leica projectors. The ones with the two spheres, the sphere at each end. I have not seen it, but I've heard that the results are quite impressive, particularly at a quarter the price, even with the expensive lens.
Okay. So you've got this 52-pound projector, and you start running it through its paces. Are you feeling pretty good about the image, pretty much out of the box? I know it's not a consumer product, so your out of the box kind of experience maybe not as important, because you're going to have hopefully someone with some experience putting this in with some calibration capabilities, right? But you never know with the commercial, AV manager, whoever it is. So what were your initial impressions visually on it?
Well, it's heavy, very heavy. And it really does need two people to get out of the box and set up, at least. You've got to load the lens, which, while, sort of trivial from a physical point of view, can be a little nerve-wracking because everybody's lens mounting is slightly different. This one has a button at the bottom for releasing it, which makes it really easy to use. But yeah, and it can be set up on a shelf, tabletop, projection room, ceiling mount. There are some really cool staging frames that are available for it that fit pretty much perfectly. So you can stack 3 of them and do a panorama or add up their brightness for an ultra bright image.
Yeah, you mentioned that you can buy those frames directly from Barco as well.
Yeah. Which implies that they're absolutely going to work. And if they don't, it's not your problem.
Right. Yeah. So you've got to calibrate those to blending and all of that in those applications, which is
in this class of projector, that is an absolute must-have: warping and blending. Mm-hmm. Some even have external or snap-in cameras to make it much easier.
Very nice. Yes, and we're talking the 0.8-inch DLP DMD image array here for the projection, and what were you looking at as far as like expectations for the lumens, the brightness, that type of thing?
So I mean, its name is 4K15, and usually the name implies what its brightness level is. It's actually spec'd at 14,000 lumens. We hit 13,833, which is, a trivial difference. From my perspective, it hit the spec straight on. 1920 by 1200 WXUGA resolution, but it has a secret to it. Its DLP imaging chip can be moved very precisely and very quickly diagonally back and forth to emulate 3840 by 2400 UHD resolution. And the surprise for me, and I'm getting to the answer to your question, the surprise for me was that there was no light loss between WUXGA and UHD resolution. Spot on, same brightness, absolutely solid projection image, no waviness, no wobbliness that you would expect from pixel shifting. It is sort of the perfect way to do ultra high definition projection on a budget. There are UHD imaging targets that are extremely expensive because they have millions and millions of little pixels in them. This sort of makes what you have better. I mean, there's no reason to set it to 1920 by 1200. Always leave it at 4K.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you were talking about the aspect of the laser where you could have some speckle on the screen, but there's a diffuser, and
yes,
so you don't
a lot of projectors in this class now use at least one diffuser to reduce speckling. I suspect, and it's starting to filter down to the lower price projectors, a conference room class. I'm starting to see them there as well. I assume that that's going to be built in to these projectors from now on.
Well, do you just kind of taking it through? I know one of the things that you all do in your reviews is to test the fan noise to see how that works. And in terms of a commercial environment, that could be an issue, but it may not be as big of an issue, just depending on location. This does require some cooling. What do you did some testing on that? Did you notice it being particularly noisy at all, or?
Not really. And these projectors are probably going to be 20, 30, 40 feet away from people because they'll be mostly ceiling mounted or in a projection booth. So they'll be far enough away that the fan noise is not a big deal. The key thing about the laser illumination that just about everyone is using for their primary projectors now is that it doesn't get as hot and it doesn't concentrate the heat at the top of the lamp the way the old school projectors did. So you can aim them in any direction without worrying about the heat building up. But also you don't need as much cooling because they're not using as much power.
Okay.
Think of them as toasters that also put out images, and you get an idea of what's going on.
Okay. Now we're kind of burying the lead. I wanted to get some of the main things out of the way, but the big reveal of this projector that's so unique is that touchscreen. What is it that it brings to this projector? I don't recall ever seeing a touchscreen on a projector before. Is this the first time you've seen that sort of control?
There are very expensive, large auditorium projectors, particularly Christie has a line, the Griffin projectors, and they typically sell between $100,000 and $200,000, 50,000 plus lumens. They have LCD screens. I'm not sure if they're touch screens, though. So in this class of projector, this was a surprise. It puts up everything from the input and the type of color balance that you're using to what the input is. Right there in your face. You don't need to put it on screen using the menus on screen menuing system. It's right there on the side of the projector. It's a 5-inch diagonal, full color screen, and it's touch. So if you want to change something, you don't have to go climb down the ladder, get the remote control and start playing with it. You just tap on it. I couldn't think of anything easier to use for this class of projector. And I really hope other people start employing it. Doesn't seem like too expensive a thing to add to a $20,000 projector.
And you were mentioning that, interestingly, that the remote control is almost overly simplified to the point of like you need.
They provide a very simple remote control.
Yeah.
It can get to everything through the menu, but some of these things are 5 levels below the surface. There is also, I think they call it the Pulse remote control that has 5 times more stuff to do that you can use it for. But they charge, I think it's $250 for it.
And so you're able to just do all of the setup and adjustments then through that touchscreen for the most part.
Yeah, and it works well. I mean, here's something that no other projector that I know of does. It shows you what its IP address is. If it's plugged into a network, and from that, if you want, you can get right to their user interface through a browser connection. So you can monitor the projector's use. You can see when it's been on, when it's been off. You can change the input. You can change anything that the lens does. You can change the display modes right from a browser window. So you have 3 different, very different ways of adjusting and configuring this projector. You can use one of the 2 remote controls. You can use the touch screen on the machine, or through a browser interface, you have control over everything.
Now, obviously, consumer projectors all have color modes, presets that your average consumer is going to go cycling through to find what they like the best. And we always talk about those out of the box and then calibrating off of them. This projector, even though it's a commercial grade projector, also has some presets, correct? And you walk through those. What were your experiences with those? Which ones seem to work the best for what applications?
So, here's one of the dirty secrets of our business. To get top output from a laser phosphor projector, you have to put up with either an overwhelmingly blue or greenish yellow screen. Makes people's faces look like they're in a horror movie. So for this one, the 14,000 lumen spec, which we got 13,833 for in their top mode, actually looked like you could use it for anything you want. It is perfectly good for movies, perfectly good for video conferencing, excellent for live video like in a church. So by comparison, a projector like the Epson EBPU 2200 series would put out like 16,000 lumens in its dynamic mode, which was an overwhelmingly green screen. You would drop down to maybe the natural mode at 12,600 lumens to get something comparable. So the bottom line is that the Barco's top output projection mode, puts out over 1,000 extra lumens compared to a comparable mode in a comparable projector.
Okay. And you're feeling that the focus, sharpness, uniformity was all good as well?
No, absolutely. The optics of these projectors, of this projector family, is spot on. Very little focus variation, very little brightness variation. And that's unusual.
Great. And what sort of material do you typically run through a projector like this? So you're doing presentation type material, so you can see that, like you were mentioning there, and live video. Do you have sort of set content that you're using to
I start with some spreadsheets, some presentations that I have, but I also look at a DVD that I almost know by heart by now, put out by the BBC, called A Perfect Planet. And it is HDR, and its colors are just absolutely stupendous. So if the projector is not really up to color balance or gamma, the gamma range, it will show up
Okay.
because I know what these sequences look like, and if they're off, I can tell and then look at it more closely. I also look at some lesson plans. There's this really good website that the University of Colorado does called PHET. And they have these incredible science simulation video clips. They're not clips, they're interactive. They're actually JavaScript. And how three planets interact with each other, or what happens with beta decay of radioactive materials. And they show up really well on projectors. And that is their aim, is to have a class work on one of these math or science problems as a class. And that's one of the big things that I use.
Yeah, that's fairly unique content compared to our more home theater level projectors, where
but
you wouldn't need that.
Someone out there might be watching A Perfect Planet as well.
Well, that's true, but I mean, as far as the other educational content with the PowerPoints and things like that, where you need to have the words to be sharp enough to view and read. But The Perfect Planet's a good one though for anything.
Yeah, I also do something that I'm not sure many people in my position do. I connect it up to an external sound system and see how it sounds.
Sure.
Because this projector and many in its class don't have speakers.
And how did that go for you?
It's fine. The one thing that I wish that projector companies would do that is really getting going in the small consumer market is Bluetooth audio. That I wish that they would start putting in a Bluetooth connection to speakers. Seems simple, straightforward, easy to do, but nobody's tried it yet.
Yeah, even maybe a little trickier in big venues where the distance might become an issue with Bluetooth.
Yeah, but open space, you've got at least 35 to 50 feet.
Right, that's true. Other observations on this, obviously we haven't really talked about price point. Being commercial product, it's not as much of a consumer price issue, but when we combine the lens for standard throw, which is the one you were reviewing, you said it's around 29,000.
Yeah, I mean, these are not for the faint of heart, and these are these are business tools. Either
if you compare to the six figures that you mentioned earlier.
These are business tools. These are things for a large conference room, an auditorium, a school, a church, and they are meant to last 10 years. So that $20,000, $30,000, even $50,000, $100,000 is spread out over a lot of time. And the key to these projectors lasting is the laser and phosphor elements. And they have a 20,000 hour lifetime. And that's defined as the time it takes to get to 50% of its original brightness. The bulb projectors would last 2,500 hours, maybe, if you were lucky. If they were on for long stretches, like 8 or 10 hours at a time, you might only get 1,000 or 1,200 hours because of overheating.
Yeah, and then the maintenance of having to get, if it's particularly high mounted, getting to the bulb and all that.
It could be a day's worth of work, a few hours at least, to change the lamp and the filter on something mounted in the middle of a auditorium 40 feet above the seats.
Right.
Something you'd like to avoid, I think.
One of the items that comes up with the commercial projectors that doesn't come up on the residential side, where I was more familiar, is the power requirements. And you mentioned that this is either a 110 or 220 volt power option. That was interesting to me. I know that 220 becomes like a a big factor with commercial. So you just choose which one your
Yeah,
application
no, it's
requires?
just what plug you get for it, what cord you get for it. It can run 110 volts, 220, and all of the European standards,
Hmm.
because its power supply will automatically adjust.
Okay.
So the old school lamp projectors, this was about the limit you could get from 110 volts. You would have to go to 220 at this
Okay.
point. Um, I think that the high end for 110 volts is probably getting closer to 20,000 lumens now. That's 1400 watts, 1500 watts, which is the limit of a 15 amp circuit breaker.
And I guess we didn't really mention that this model that you reviewed, the 1600 4K15, is part of a family of Barco projectors. So there are two other options for lumen output, I guess, right? That's how they separate out the three.
Yeah,
You've
I
got the
think there's an
4K8,
8,000
mm-hmm,
and
10,000, and a 14.
yeah,
So, which
and
is,
they all use the same lenses. So if you have rooms of different sizes in your facility, might make sense to get 3 of these or 4 of these, one for each room with the different outputs. So, like
mm-hmm,
a mid-sized conference room, you would get the low output one. For the big auditorium or mid-sized auditorium, you would get the 4K15.
and I guess we kind of wrap up the review with the connections and the pieces, things that go on the back of the projector typically. So we didn't mention what connection options there are for this. I don't want to leave that out of the conversation.
So, it basically you would end up using HDMI
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. There's no legacy analog ports on this. And the thing that it doesn't have is a video out port. And while most people would say, well, why would you want that? For these big rooms, you might want to put a small screen at a lectern on stage, or where the minister or priest is. You might want to have an overflow room that just gets the video. And it makes it much easier to do it from the projector. So the good news is that this family of projectors uses Barco's Pulse add-in boards, and they have 5 or 6 of them. They sell for a few $1,000s. But the key thing is that underneath the control panel on the projector is a blank slide-in slot for it. So you remove the cover, you slide in the board, you screw it in, and you can have just a wide variety of extra ports on it. Like there's one that has 4 display ports on it. So if you need a lot of inputs right at the projector, you just
Yeah.
get that.
Well, I would say that overall this review was very positive. Other than that connection to another video output would be, there weren't really complaints or concerns that you listed. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
So one last thing that few people in this market offer. So the really big positive about using DLP is that you can have sealed optics. No dust can get into the optical elements, so you don't need a dust filter. You occasionally have to clean off the vents and the lens, but that's about it. This projector goes a step further. So if you're in a dirty environment or even outside, there's a $120 snap-on filter that literally just goes right on the front of the projector and can protect it if you're in a dirty environment. So, I think that they've thought about just about everything for this projector.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you taking us through. It was a really thorough review, as usual, and you're staying busy with us, getting some new ones lined up. So we encourage folks to read the review, get deeper dive into the details, things that we might have not talked about here. And we're going to, we're running through the photos here during the podcast, but you can take a closer look at images. It does come in two colors, just like the old, it used to be Model T was one color, right?
Right.
So you
anything as long as you like black.
That's it. This is your typical projector, black or white. So that is what you'll see in the images, but we have that posted and interconnected here with the comment or with the show notes. So thanks for taking us through it. And you've got another projector review upcoming. It's in edit right now on the Sharp XP M401, which is a price different side of the pendulum there as far as like price point, right? For a classroom or conference room.
Yeah. I mean, that's, a smaller conference room, large classroom, lecture hall. It could probably even be stretched to a small auditorium because it's almost over 5,000 lumens of light, which used to be the dividing line of small venue. I think it's a little bit higher now, maybe 7,000 lumens, but you can stretch it. Yeah. A different class, but just as innovative, I think.
Well, Brian, looking forward to that one as well. I got to get to work on that and get it through fact check and all that. We'll get it posted here in the next couple of weeks. But thanks again for your time today. And hopefully you get some baseball in later. It doesn't rain out.
Thanks for inviting me, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure.
Brian Nadel is a freelance writer and editor who specializes in technology reporting and reviewing. You can read his full review of Barco's 1,600-4K15 DLP laser projector at ProjectorCentral.com. A direct link to the story is available in our show notes. And that wraps up today's Projector podcast from Projector Central. Please subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Also, check out all the latest projector product news and reviews at ProjectorCentral.com, where you can also subscribe to receive links to our latest articles on the day that they were posted. And thank you to Elite Screens for sponsoring today's podcast as well. We really appreciate their support. For Brian Nadel, I'm Jeremy Glowacki. Thanks for listening.